fill my Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice, and today's guest is Joël Brierre. He is a yogi and a sacred medicine practitioner and a spiritual emergence coach, and he is the founder of Kaivalya Kollektiv. So what I'm interested in particular in your self-presentation, Joel, and I want to find out more about, is that you call yourself entheogenic yogi, which is a word I love because it's one of my personal definitions of the divine, right? It's like finding God within yourself. And how do we do that? And of course, one of the ways that we have done that, whether or not we've been capable of naming it, is sexual pleasure is going out of ourselves in the moment of orgasm. So that's one experience that I think most people have, no matter what they tend to call it. But finding that greater I am, or that greater consciousness within the divine, is just life-changing. So I know through the word sacred medicine that there are psychedelics involved, right, in your research. But I would love to hear more about it. What your journey through meditative space and then sacred entheogenic enlightenment, right? How that happens. So tell me a little bit. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Washington, D.C.
Oh, cool.
My father's from Haiti, and my mother is from New York. And I grew up in Washington, D.C., and then I ended up leaving in around 2007 and left the U.S. and then have traveled all around, lived all around the world. But my roots are in D.C., but now they are in Los Angeles.
Right.
That's
so how did you find this path? How did you start on this path, and where? I assume you had a guru or a mentor or someone, right?
Yes. So I've had, throughout my life, I've been fortunate enough to have many different mentors, teachers, and gurus. I was raised with a very spiritual upbringing. Both my parents were very into different meditations and a lot of kind of different new agey things at that time in the 80s. And so I got to experience a lot of that, and I was taught to meditate when I was a kid. But I kind of traveled very far from that practice, we'll say, in my youth, and had to get into all sorts of trouble to learn my lessons. So my early years were spent in Washington, D.C., getting into as much trouble as I humanly could. But after that, I moved to the Caribbean, to the Virgin Islands, and found my first two teachers there, one who was a Taoist yoga teacher, one who was a Kundalini teacher. I later took on a Peruvian curandero as a teacher when I was assisting with fire-keeping ceremonies. I have a guru now, Guruji Dr. Achar, and he is from India, beautiful, beautiful human. And I've had lots of other teachers along the way, lots of different lineages. I would say what I teach and offer now is a blending of many beautiful teachings that I was fortunate enough to learn. The view on psychedelics and entheogens is that they're only going to go as far as a person takes them. They're only going to have as much lasting effect as a person puts in the effort to integrate into their daily life. Back in the day, I was a hardcore, what we would call psychonaut. Back in the 90s especially, I was devouring psychedelics at a ridiculous rate. But I wouldn't say that I was getting a whole lot from it. Of course, it was showing me that there was a lot more to this all than meets the eye. But I was doing no effort to, set a proper setting. I wasn't setting an intention and really trying to think about what I was going in there to do. I was kind of doing as escapism back then and kind of just thoughtlessly. But even now, a lot of people who come to me, they say, I have people reaching out saying, hey, because I specifically work with 5-MeO-DMT, which is the most potent, powerful psycho substance on the planet. And I constantly have people say, because a few articles have come out about it, making some miraculous claims. And so I'll have people reach out saying, I heard if I do this medicine, it'll cure my depression or it'll cure my anxiety. So I always like to stop them there and say, this medicine is not a cure-all. It is not a magic pill by any means. It can give us the ability. It can show us, just as you said, it can show us where we're holding resistance. It can show us where we may not be accepting what is. It can show us where we need to do our work. And then it's really up to us to take it into our daily life and do that work. Especially with this one, 5-MeO-DMT is such a big, powerful substance. It's the only one that can regularly give a non-dual experience, which is where there is no longer a subject-object relationship, no longer a you and I, no longer this or that, etc. It is pure, undifferentiated source, pure totality and awareness. And while that is an amazing, amazing experience to have the drop rejoin the ocean, the beautiful remembrance of our full totality, while that is amazing and provides that cathartic release, it's really what happens after where the magic is. Because once we've been cracked open like that, it's the catalyst. It's the budding of the flower. But then that flower needs water, and it needs love, and it needs space. And that flower is going to need room to shake off whatever's been holding it in. Because throughout our life, we collect so many what we call samskaras, so many different patterns, so many different systems and structures we put on ourselves. So much it instead of simply being.
Right.
And so then this process allows to bring it all to the surface. And then it's really about holding space for what comes up, holding space for what emerges, and using tools that were given to us through these ancient teachings, such as yoga, which is the main tool that I would use in this yogic philosophy and meditation, using these tools of self-inquiry to study ourselves and understand where we're holding on, where we're not putting enough effort, really get to know ourselves. And then from there, it's like a rebirth, it's a full rebirth, and we can replan out how we want to reemerge into the world, how we want to present ourselves with this newfound knowledge of unity.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a good time to cultivate your inner garden, right? To go inward and see what your priorities are, and if there is a spiritual, search that you've been putting aside or ignoring, but it's interesting to you or important to you. It's a good time to kind of like face our mortality and see what that means, when we hear about deaths, when we hear about decisions between how many deaths versus like how many people will be making money, is the economy more important than, a certain number of fatalities, questions like that where, it actually is obvious that, our culture is quantifying values that are moral, right? Make you stop and think, do you put like monetary value on these kinds of questions that are really about our essence, or as humans, our moral core. And I also feel that there is already, there was already kind of like a, it was a little fashionable already, because of like tech culture, I think primarily, because tech culture came from California, where you are, and California had kind of like a tradition, like a pre-existing, strong, let's say hippie culture from the 60s, and LSD and all of that, the whole Aldous Huxley, let's say tradition, right? So it kind of stayed that way, it stayed in the culture enough. So, then we, now it's like microdosing. Everybody's talking about it, because like now that cannabis is legal, there is a lot of conversation about how to incorporate it into one's life, not to get high, but to get like specific, somatic or spiritual benefits, So
optimizing our system. Right,
optimizing your functionality rather than just like relaxing, which is how or escaping, which is how it used to be when it was illegal, and people would just like get high and check out, and not have to. Yeah, right. So, I mean, you're still, of course, you're still doing most of the practice out of the country, right? I imagine.
Yes. Our retreats are done in Mexico and Jamaica.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I do a lot of spiritual emergence coaching from home. I do that via Zoom sessions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helping people through. Sometimes it's integrating a psychedelic experience. Sometimes they're going through a bit of a contraction before a large expansion that may feel like a psychotic break. Sometimes just holding space and using the tools from the Vedas, using the tools of Vedanta, using the tools of inquiry to really dissect and pick apart what's coming up for them and help them understand and slowly pull all the threads and the threads that weave the thoughts of the mind, and eventually the whole veil unravels and it's a beautiful cathartic release.
Yeah. It's kind of like alchemical, right? Wouldn't you say in nature that like there is some, if you put your faith, I feel like, they call it in alchemy, they call it the philosopher's stone, but it's like, what's that magical, that's like unknown ingredient that makes the transmutation, the change happen. And to me, okay, so let's take like Christian, practice, which we're all familiar with. What makes in Christianity transmutation possible? It's 100% faith. You have to be a believer, and if you are a believer, then let's say the holy words, right? The chant, the sacred chant that the priest who is also holy is doing in the over the altar in the sanctuary, which is also holy. So you kind of like have to have that faith in the holiness of these elements, and then through the sacred words, the alchemy happens to like the wine and bread, and this is the chosen. This is these are the chosen vehicles. It's kind of like every day. It could be something else, and then the believers imbibe, through the priest, the wine and the bread, and their faith makes that wine and bread become the body of Jesus, of Christ. So I think that's like very basically how alchemy works in our lives. Is we have to put our faith in something, whether it's our own ability to, morph, or whatever substance facilitates that for us. Some sort of like experience that seems that feels like important, different, unique in our life, and after which you feel like you went through a transformation, and now you can start new.
Oh yeah.
Who are you? I'm just curious, like who are the people who come to you most? What's your typical, let's say, practitioner, newbie, who comes, how do you recruit for the retreats? And then, I'm interested, like what jobs most of these people do in in daily life, and what are your numbers, and how they are experiencing this change, this like COVID-19 moment. So that's a lot of questions. Yeah,
no, it's perfect. So for our retreats, the type of participants we get is a very varied crowd. It ranges from age groups from early 20s to, I believe, the oldest we've had is 81 join a retreat. We've had a few people in their 70s and 60s. It's a really mixed crowd. We have some people who come there who are entheogenically inclined, as I would say, who have a lot of psychedelic experience and are really ready to get down to the nitty gritty. They've worked with different medicines. They've done a lot, but now they're ready to really put it to good use, trying to, kind of take it to another level. We get, I guess, a lot of our other crowd would also be people who are in their 50s and 60s, who during this psychedelic renaissance that we're experiencing, they may have read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind with Psychedelics, etc. and started to kind of, I remember this from the 60s. Maybe there is something to this, and started to get interested. And so, got online and got well educated and well read, and knew that they wanted to do it responsibly and well. And then they do their research. And in the 5-MeO realm, we put a lot of work into our retreats. A lot of integrity goes into the container that we set, and it shows. People notice it. And so we find that our crowd is really the earnest seekers who want to do some real work. We don't really have too many who are coming for a vacation or coming just to have some fun. We've been blessed to have, no matter from what age group or background, I would say all the people that join us are really ready to get down to business and do some work. And that's always really, really nice when engaged in teaching spiritual practices and doing this deep work, when people are ready to meet you there with that same effort that you're bringing. And it's always really refreshing. As for numbers, we don't like to do big retreats. We keep our retreats 10 people max. Usually we go up to 15 if there's multiple practitioners and assistants. But the idea is for everyone to get individual attention. Everyone's got their own stories. Everyone has to go over their own hurdles to release what they need to release. Everyone's going to go through their own journey before that big surrender into the infinite. So that deserves special attention, so no one gets lost in the crowd. So we begin with preparation. We always start working with participants weeks before the retreat, at least, where they're screened medically, physically, psychologically, emotionally. And we begin assisting them with journaling into themselves. So we have little journaling assignments. Like the first one they receive for preparation is based on the 5 kleshas, the 5 root causes of suffering in yogic philosophy. So they can go through and look at these 5 causes of suffering fully explained out and see where in their life some of those may be present. And they can start identifying that, seeing where they may be holding resistance to the natural flow of things that is only causing turbulence. And that helps them start to narrow in on an intention. And so we do a few calls or video chats with each participant before the retreat to really help them kind of narrow in on what they're coming there to do. So when they get there, they're ready to go. And then we also even open it up with a nice big video chat with all the participants too before the retreat, so everyone can get to know each other a little bit and ease up and kind of break the ice a bit. And that helps when they get to the location. It helps them feel the warmth of the container straight away. It helps them feel ready. There's not that awkward having to find yourself around, having to find your comfort. Some are professionals. Some are, we have, on our last retreat, we had a scientist. We had a doctor. A few were retired. There was some who were in the service industry, restaurant industry. Some who work for themselves. I would say as for careers and stuff, that is completely, we see all over the board. We haven't found one kind of specific type of group that's coming to us more than another yet. More so just anyone who's just really ready to dive in.
Mm-hmm. And so how are they, what's the general response to what's happening now in that community? Do you feel that people have like better tools to deal with all the changes? Do you feel that people are, kind of like worried, or, that when will they be able to go again? Or
worries will come up. Worries will arise, as they are natural during a time of uncertainty like this. What I have found with, I can speak for myself, of course, and for many others who have done a lot of good work into themselves, that we're okay with not knowing. That there's an ability to rest in restlessness. That yes, worries can arise, but we do not have to attach to these worries. Especially this medicine or this work period, serious self-inquiry is going to lead you naturally to begin to allow yourself to surrender a bit. Especially with this medicine, the only thing you need to do for this medicine is surrender. So, I feel that this has really given a lot of people a good head start on understanding how to surrender. But it's not just surrender, lie back and let whatever happen.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah,
in general, in kind of like less modernized, less global time frame cultures, we are very comfortable in slow time. We are comfortable with periods of time where we don't do much. We're not so like production focused and achievement focused. We're okay with like hanging out.
We can be human beings instead of human doing.
Right. Yeah. And we don't feel like if we spend the day, like talking to friends and hanging out and, whatever, working in the yard or, taking long walks, going food shopping. We don't feel that day is wasted, whereas in the kind of like global economy world, we're very much trained to produce,
kind of goal-oriented lifestyle.
Right.
To the extreme. Yeah.
Right. And the goal is connected to like monetizing also. So, you may say, I finished like a book, but that doesn't count,
Yeah.
Right.
No, I would say that this medicine has shown me to be okay when things are burning down around me, because naturally we will always feel a contraction before a big expansion. Things need to dissolve before there can be regeneration and regrowth. We are now seeing a lot of old paradigms, a lot of old stories, a lot of old ways of thinking are now falling away. And of course, there's the natural tendency of the mind to hold on and grasp for it as it falls away, simply because it is falling away. However, we get to sit back and know that, okay, things are changing, things are growing, we're evolving and expanding, but we cannot expand without breaking off our shackles. There has to be a little bit of turbulence here. There has to be some falling away. There has to be recognition of the old patterns that no longer serve us. So I think for a lot of us, as you said, yes, on the spiritual path, it has put us in a fortunate position of not feeding into the panic, because we know that no matter what, we simply are. And that is the only constant, is that we are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Exactly. Yeah. And, and I asked you about your let's say, I guess, clients, the metrics, because, just from my own like personal research into burners and, people who go to Burning Man, or at least used to go, a little while ago when it wasn't so much about like, Instagramming and taking photos and like, getting cred because you've been. But I was surprised to find that so many of them were what one would call in the political universe, let's say, more conservative, right? It wasn't more libertarian. So I was surprised to see that it's not so much like liberals, the way that I expected it. I expected like conservatives don't do this stuff and liberals do. We try everything out, and so but I noticed that actually, there's always the people who just like go to party and get high and do like have like an orgy of drugs. But at the average person, like when you talk to them, or at least some years ago, I haven't gone recently, but they were very much the classic American, that classic kind of like American of the movies, or the mythology of the American who is like self-reliant and who goes out there and and kind of like creates space and new space, who believes in like inclusion and and participation and honesty in kind of like a more radical way, but is not necessarily like judgmental and preachy in the way that both liberals and conservatives these days are, and it's like, where are these people, why are they not represented in the media, all over like the general daily conversation, these there were a lot of people who I thought they were like more like Republicans, and again, like, you don't talk politics, but because I'm a political animal, I kind of like try to always have a sense. I want to know like who I'm dealing with. I don't want someone who is like life makes him, hideous to me morally, be my friend in one of these, kind of bigger groups. So, I want to make sure that like he doesn't come from one of those huge families that fund everything I am against, right? So I kind of like ask questions. Plus, it's like this is what I do. Like the whole idea of the podcast and the writing, it's very much an anthropological research. You're interested in like humanity and where it's going and where it's coming from and what what questions does it face? And so I'm always surprised, and that's why I asked you that, because a lot of these people were Republican leaning, I would say, in their politics, and I think they probably even voted for Trump, even though I haven't been since that election. But like that was the leaning, and nevertheless, there were people who like devoted to, self-reliance, and as I said, and inclusion, communal effort, civic responsibility, like living not race, keeping the environment clean, charity, decommodification in a sense, because that's what the whole bedding culture is. It's you have a great time and survive on very little, right? So you don't need all these other objects that we seem to work towards. So that is a question that I can't quite resolve, because when you all hang out together and you like create your camp together and you work together and you take your duty, there's almost like an element of like like a drug army, like you are the warriors of psychedelics or something, right? So it's like, where are we? Why do we feel like, this commitment to like joy and excitement and well-being and partnership and all that stuff? Why is it lost in our political conversation, or even like the way the media represents most Americans, and instead we seem to always be at odds, and I don't know, but it's something that I've always wondered about this community, the kind of, this community of like retreats and spiritual path, and self-change, and which I think, combines these two ways that otherwise in the culture we feel are antithetical.
Feels as if globally, we're in spiritual emergence as a human race right now. Everyone is going through it, and we've had people from all different types of political backgrounds. I don't know if we've ever had any kind of hardcore right-wing people on any of our retreats or anything, but I have worked with some, and it's interesting. Everyone's feeling something. Everyone is feeling this, and they're experiencing it in their own way. And it's very interesting. All I can say is watching someone from a far right kind of political stance doing this type of self-inquiry and then watching the things that fall away is very interesting to watch. If someone has taken on a worldview that is based on benefiting the self and taking from others, we will tend to see some torment in their experience and in their journey of shedding. But I'd say I've been pleasantly surprised at the variety of types of people who have been stepping up to do this work as of late.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the sex part, right? So part of this kind of like non-duality, I assume, would include less monogamy, like the same way that one understands God differently. One might understand a relationship differently, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The deeper I came into understanding of my true state of being, the more I understood non-duality as much as it can get understood. I feel it's an oxymoron. But the more I surrendered into that mystery, the less I understood monogamy. Or I can say the more I understood how monogamy came about, and it started to look to me as if it was the product or the same thing as what happened to religion. as we took something that was beyond understanding, something of the mystic, and tried to create structure and make ownership of it, because it is our natural egoic tendency to want to own and want to covet and want to have for myself that which gives me pleasure, that which completes me. And then that, that gets into a whole nother conversation, about trying to find one person that completes you. It's, that's when real trouble starts. But yeah, I found that my ability to really understand and take that concept seriously began to dwindle. And coming into terms with that and beginning to understand that and what it means, and has been an amazing practice as of late. Has brought so much up and helped integrate so many learnings from my life. And it's been very beautiful.
Right. So how do you practice specifically? You practice open relationship or?
Yes. My wife and I guess it would be ethically non-monogamous.
Okay.
I guess would be the title. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not as polyamorous as I guess with polyamory. There's multiple real full-on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
With my wife and I, we are each other's central column. That sacred marriage, and we hold space for each other to explore in other ways, but keep that, but have that central core to come back to. And it's been a very, very, very beautiful way of finding real communication with each other, and has deepened our relationship in ways that I can't even understand yet. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you done that for?
Oh, not long at all. This is a matter of months. This is very new in my. This is very new. It's been the process of a long time. My sexuality was something that I repressed very aggressively through my yogic practice. As a yogi, you get into that mind state of, I've got to take all that sexual energy and just draw it up the spine for higher use, for creative use. I've got to, deny those types of pleasures. They're just distractions. And I got into that whole headset. Yeah. And I got into that for so long. And, before that, it was something that I struggled with. I had a very, very active drive. And so it, got me in trouble because I tried to deny it and I tried to put it in, tried to just shove it away, and it would make its way out in other ways. And this has allowed me to really go in there and look at it, and to start shedding away the shame that has come with it, start shedding away all the dogmatic ideologies that I had wrapped around intimacy, pleasure, sex, and love. And it's allowed for a far more authentic relationship with my wife and myself. It's really deepened my relationship with myself.
So, because the gurus kind of are complicated that way. I feel that, there are some exceptions like Osho, Rajneesh, but typically they seem to preach, asexuality. It's kind of freedom from the needs or the compulsions of the just the body.
Yeah.
But
they call it brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is restraint from sexual urges, but I feel it was misunderstood and taken too literally. I believe brahmacharya is mindful control of one's sexual energy.
Right.
Just not letting it all just go wherever, just mindlessly.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Which is what we call conscious sex, right? Being able to be conscious throughout, from the beginning of the desire to basically the orgasmic completion or multi-orgasmic completion or whatever you choose to call, put a period momentarily. If one can be conscious throughout the whole process and able for good reason to walk out of it throughout the whole process, then I feel that it's mindful. And then you gain from that, and if you can kind of bring others into that same consciousness, then that's how we transform our way of understanding life and our relationship with our creative power. And but for sure there is always a challenge, because most religions, including the Christian one, right, the the practitioners, like the holy men, usually it's the men, and, the holy ones, the leaders, reach a place where they feel that they are holy enough or accomplished enough where they can actually have sex again, allow themselves to have sex because they're above that, or they've reached a certain stage. And then to everyone around them, if that becomes known, it seems as pure, hypocrisy. So, it's hard to kind of like understand what's up, right? And a lot of it is either kept secret, or, silent, So I feel that, a big part of our challenge is to be able to integrate all of this in a way that seems, respectful. So it doesn't, it doesn't feel like blasphemy, but it feels, it's kind of like evolution.
Yes, exactly. I love what Ramana Maharishi said. He likened spiritual practices to thorns used to remove other thorns. As spiritual practices are useful techniques, yet they are still structures of the ego by the ego designed for the ego. And yet we need structures for the ego in order to give us geography to navigate these spaces. But then just as you said, when you get to a certain point, then it's important to release those things, because then those maps that we once used to navigate can become a prison. If we hold ourselves in abstinence, which is a spiritual practice, and no spiritual practice should just be taken, for your whole life without ever reinvestigating it. There are techniques to get us to a certain place, and this abstinence is a discipline that can get you to a certain place. But at some point, everyone's path is different, but it's important that we remember that we're here to play. We're here to experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and getting to enjoy the tactile senses of this beautiful, delicious playground is a lot of the fun.
Right.
So it's we can get ourselves into punishing ourselves, and just saying, no, I'm trying so hard to just be the one, that we end up shorting ourselves out on a lifetime of experience before we just die and go back to be the one.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Which is a whole other, oh my God, that's another subject. That's another full podcast series, which I, can get into. But sex and death kind of like a little bit overlap. And, in America, partly our relationship to sexuality, yes, is challenged, so much of it is done secretly or silently or whatever. But then the relationship to mortality is even more limited, because, people can't deal with it. They just want to avoid it.
Oh, it's
completely.
big. Yeah. My wife is a death doula, an end-of-life coach.
Wow. Yeah.
And she trains death doulas. She trains people to become end-of-life coaches, and holding space for the dying is very sacred work. And not only that, but holding space for the family and loved ones of the dying, holding space for the dying as they're coming to terms with the fact that they're dying, all those different stages. There's so much there, but there's so much medicine. And then it's such a deep spiritual practice. And it's very, very, very humbling to watch her in her work when she is guiding someone in transition. It is, wow, is all I can say.
Yeah. No, it's wow, exactly. It sounds wow. I mean, I kind of talk about, or I try in my work in all kinds of different ways to reduce and eliminate feelings of shame and pain and suffering and self-hatred and guilt and anxiety during sex, just because people are naked, because, in sex they feel so vulnerable, because they don't have all the cover-ups that the modern world hides us, hides our truth behind. So whether it's the phone screen or filters, or all kinds, all the things that we do, not just the costumes, the clothes we wear, but the accent that we have, the way we move our bodies, the way, the pronoun we use, the identity, right? The whole identity that we choose to take on. And, if we think that we're an alpha or a beta or and how we think the world perceives us. And that's just such a huge right? Construct. I mean, even the cosmetic surgery, or, the hair color, or the, I don't know, straightening of the hair, or the curling of the hair, or the, you know what I mean? Like, it's endless if you look at it. And it's all like the construction of identity that we feel more comfortable in, because we feel is more what we would like to look to be than what we actually are. So like when you're naked with someone, especially if the lights are on, at some point in during the sexual exchange, you stop being self-conscious, or you won't feel it, right? You won't enjoy it. So when you're no longer self-conscious is when you are so exposed, because you cannot control like how you look, how you appear, it's like, especially from the back, but really from anywhere, you just can't. You can't control that and open up completely to just the sensation. So I feel that a lot of that, that unconsciousness is where a lot of the fear of like sex begins. And then it, because we don't have like simple ways to clarify that, it turns into sexual dysfunction that affects, like sensual pleasure, ability to orgasm, like even arousal, all that. So, but imagine now if you replace that vulnerability, that you have like during the few moments of being naked with someone else face to face without all of your shields. Imagine if you replace that with dying, which like the orgasm is a tiny symbol. We call it little death, right? Petit mort. Right. So it's a tiny symbol of that, extraordinary like loss of control and loss of all that assumed identity. You kind of like slowly or quickly, depending on the occasion, lose all of that stuff that you've structured to prop you up. And it's just an extreme danger, right? It's a place of extreme danger for the consciousness that you've constructed for a lifetime and the identity that you've, put together. Your hard-earned, like identity that you've made everybody agree is you. Like, this is who you are. God damn it, I am X, Y, and Z. And then there you are, and I feel that, sexual honesty is a tiny bit of training toward accepting our inevitable, end, our passage, our transition, our dying. So, the idea that death is like something we all, fear and avoid at all costs, is understandable, but it's, also not rational, because we know that we're all going to die, and so why are we so keen to like not know anything about it? Why do we want to control everything except that? Right? Like, why do we practice so hard not being conscious of the fact that we're mortal? And this is like a mortal flesh, right? That we're wrapped in. Yeah.
That goes right back to the when I was talking about the 5 kleshas, the system we use for preparation. The first klesha is avidya. Ignorance, not as in ignorance as in stupidity, but ignorance of our own true nature as infinite source. If we forget that we are everything, we're going to think this is all going to end. And it naturally leads into asmita, which is egoism, or over-identifying with the self. And that's really where, we begin to over-attach to this life. But then the last klesha, which the last klesha is abhinivesa, which is fear, ultimately fear of death. And then that goes right back into avidya. You think you're going to die if you don't remember you're everything and infinite.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is the corporeal death. There is the social identity death. There are many there are many deaths. Other, besides like the spiritual death. There are many symbolic little deaths. Even though I do feel that the orgasm is the one that like everybody experiences, and that's why sex is scary. Yeah, and that's why like in the original Genesis, right, they use sex as the intro or the explanation of mortality. I mean, right? Like, wait, when they came up, like when our ancestors, at the beginning of patriarchy, I figure, came up with this story, the cosmogony for Christianity. It's like we're in the garden and we're not dying in the garden. No. Well, there is no such concept because it's all divine. So we're all immortal. Yeah. And then someone gets knowledge of the fact that something is not quite permanent here, and when they feel their nakedness, and when they start having to reproduce people, when they start reproducing people, is also when they face their mortality. So both of those happen simultaneously, as you get kicked out of that kind of immortal heaven. So it's at the same time that, Eve feels her nakedness or her shame and Adam covers himself. That's the time of knowing that you can die and that you also are sexual. Right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, they kind of like gave us that portal. it's one and the same. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we should all go, maybe we should all be like going out, having an orgasm. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if there is a way to facilitate that.
It's funny, because this medicine, 5-MeO-DMT, the experience, a lot of the time, it feels not just orgasmic, but very orgasmic. Wow. Like orgasm times a million. I'm not sure, I'm fairly sure I coined this term, but I'm not going to claim to have. I'm not sure 100% sure if I coined it, but the GodGasm.
Wow, and, I love that.
The GodGasm is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just like the universe having sex with itself. It's just this full body. It's not just a full body orgasm. It's a full universe. It's a full source. It is everything going through ecstatic rapture at the same moment for infinity. And it is amazing, but it makes sense that, because I remember coming out after my first time being like, wow, that felt like a really big orgasm, but it makes sense that it would, because that feeling, if we're tapping into non-dual source, we're tapping right into creation. Therefore, when we are creating within that, in our own fractal way, we would taste a little bit of that,
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. Who prepares that formula, or what's in it?
The alkaloid is also, it's found in the secretion of the Bufo Alvarius toad, the Sonoran desert toad. Mm-hmm. And then we use it in its main pure form, which is just a pure isolated alkaloid, 5-methoxy-DMT. Mm-hmm. So it comes in a powder form, and it is vaporized.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it takes hold within seconds.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. But essentially the closest thing it's to chemically would be serotonin.
Right. And where do you obtain that? You guys, I mean.
Oh, well.
Okay, so it's ready. Okay.
Through the mystic realms of the underground entheogenic kingdom.
Okay. Wait, I love that. I think we could do like a whole series. I love that kingdom. The entheogenic kingdom sounds like it could be a great Netflix series.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
There you go. That's that's the pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, good, sweet. So I'm pretty much done.
I wouldn't mind ending with a short little poem of mine, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
I've kind of been coining my own little genre of psychedelic sexual poetry that is quite fun. And it's let's see here, what have we got? Within the stillness, something is brewing, alchemized by more than just the alpha and omega. Fear not the contractions we are experiencing. Allow them to mold us, to rearrange us in order to make room. Feel into the pulsating expansion, the quivering lips of curious consciousness. As the earth shakes, the mountains tremble with heat. Steam erupts and Mother Nature moans and curls her toes. Something is happening here. Can you feel it? Fear is in the air, yet the juices of creation taste so sweet. Let our lips hold yesterday's memories as we speak into existence a new tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sweet. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. That was a perfect ending. And thank you for sharing your interesting and valuable juices and truths. And everybody out there, thanks for listening. And until next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.